Hey guys, tonight we're going way back to a moment on the African savanna about 1.5 million years ago. The air is heavy with the dry season heat. The tall grasses around you crisp and golden. In the distance, thunder grumbles over the horizon, and you watch as a jagged bolt of lightning splits the sky. A heartbeat later, there's the sharp crack of impact, and almost instantly, a column of smoke begins to rise. The smell hits you before the heat does. Sharp, biting, and oddly sweet, like roasted seeds and scorched hair. That's fire, and you probably
The
won't
light
survive this
dances
first
in a way
encounter
you've never
unless you
seen
learn
before.
what it means. Eating through the grass in long, orange tongues. Sparks leap from stalk to stalk, carried by the wind. You can hear the hiss and pop of seeds exploding, the deep, muffled whoosh as patches of brush catch. Animals are scattering, zebras pounding away in a rolling thunder of hooves, small antelope darting between termite mounds, and vultures already circling for what they know is coming. Before we start walking through that ancient smoke, tell me where you are right now and what time it is. I want to know if you're watching this at midnight, under your blanket, or maybe in the quiet of early morning before the rest of the world wakes. Drop it in the comments. And if you're listening with your eyes closed, I want you to picture the glow of that first fire flickering against your eyelids. So let's slip into the past. Stay low to the ground and see what happens when humans meet the most dangerous and most useful element they would ever know. Because by the end of tonight's story, you'll see exactly how this one moment rewrote the fate of our entire species. The first time you see it, you freeze. Not just you, your whole group halts mid-step. There's no word for fire yet, of course, but the brain still knows danger when it sees it. The light is alive, moving with intention, faster than a predator can run when the wind carries it. You can feel the heat licking the front of your body, even from a distance, a dry, clawing warmth that makes your skin prickle. Someone in your group gives a low warning grunt. Everyone edges back. Fire is as much a predator as any lion, and it's bigger than all of you combined. But here's the twist. Your curiosity lingers. You've seen lightning before, yes, but you've never seen it make something new. The blackened grass behind the flames still smokes, and you can see dark shapes lying motionless there. As the fire advances, the back edges die down, leaving behind an eerie stillness. It's dangerous, but it leaves things behind, and early humans are scavengers at heart. You wait, hours pass. The air smells like ash and hot stone. When the flames finally crawl away over a hill, you and a few others creep forward. The ground is warm under your feet, a thin crust of blackened soot crunching as you step. Here's the first shock. You see a small antelope, its fur singed, lying still. Flies are already gathering. You crouch closer, cautious of the smoke curling from its flank, and tear away a piece. The meat is darker, softer, and the smell different. You taste it. It's richer, almost sweet, and strangely easier to chew. You don't know it yet, but you've just had your first bite of cooked food. Natural fire doesn't happen every day. Out here, it's usually lightning strikes at the end of the dry season, or when the earth itself cracks and spits flame near a volcanic vent. And volcanoes, those are a whole other level of terror. Imagine living near the Rift Valley's steaming fissures, the ground shuddering beneath you, strange gases hissing from cracks, and sudden bursts of molten rock rolling down like angry rivers. You don't hang around to watch, unless you're far enough away to feel safe, in which case you stare for hours, hypnotized by the molten glow. Even without volcanoes, the land gives you glimpses of fire's power. Sometimes it's a slow burn creeping through dry undergrowth. Other times a sudden, explosive blaze that races faster than anything can escape. Both are dangerous. Both leave behind opportunity. Predators know it too. Lions, hyenas, even jackals shadow the edges of a burn, ready to snatch up fleeing or weakened prey. You've seen lions slink into smoking grass, just minutes after a fire passes, their golden fur blending with the ash-stained ground. It's not just the meat. After a burn, plants sprout tender green shoots, much faster than in untouched areas, drawing grazing herds back. You don't yet understand the cycle, but you notice patterns. Fire clears the old, and the new grows quickly. That means food comes back in numbers. Even now, your instincts are storing that information, ready to recall it when survival depends on it. One night, not long after your first encounter, you see something new. Far away on a dark hill, the grass catches from a lightning strike, and the wind carries the fire toward a grove. It burns slower there, caught by damp leaves and heavier air, and you notice something strange. The fire glows even when it's small. It smolders. You move closer than usual, curiosity outweighing fear. The warmth draws you in, and for the first time, you feel its heat without running from it. You stretch your hands toward it. It's uncomfortable, but in a way that feels useful. The cold night air presses against your back, the fire's heat against your front, and you feel like you're between two worlds. It doesn't last. A gust of wind flares the flames, and instinct forces you back. The next morning, the fire is gone. Only grey ash and white powdery bones remain. But the memory sticks. Fire doesn't just kill, it transforms. Early hominins probably had this same mix of fear and fascination. Think about it. Before you even know how to make it, you've already seen it change the taste of food, keep predators away, and make night brighter. But you've also seen it leap and devour without warning. It's alive in a way that no other force in nature seems to be, and it's unpredictable. Sometimes it comes from the sky, sometimes from the ground, sometimes not at all for years. Your group doesn't yet have the skill to summon it at will, so each encounter feels rare and important. You might follow the smoke from miles away, timing your arrival so you reach the edge just as the flames fade. You might linger near a patch of smouldering logs, hoping to carry away a chunk still glowing inside. It's dangerous work. One misstep and you lose fur, skin, or worse, but the reward is worth it. In these first encounters, there's no mastery. There's no control in the modern sense. There's only observation, risk, and small rewards for those who dare. You notice patterns. Certain trees burn longer, certain grasses catch faster, and wet wood smokes instead of flaming. You don't write it down. There's no language yet. But you remember. That's the beginning of fire knowledge. You also begin to notice fire's other gifts. In the days after a burn, the nights seem quieter. Predators don't come close to the blackened ground, perhaps wary of the smell or the lack of cover. You sleep a little deeper, even without a fire of your own. You find stones cracked open by heat, revealing sharp edges inside, edges you can use. You find clay hardened into shapes, its texture changed by the flame. These are small clues, breadcrumbs toward a future where fire will shape almost everything you do. For now, it's still a thing of the wild, born in storms, in the earth's deep vents, or from the reckless spread of dry season winds. You have no say in when it arrives, no power over how it moves. But already, you've taken the first step. You've stopped running quite so far, quite so fast. You've started watching. And for humans, watching is the beginning of everything. You've seen it before, but this time, you're closer, bolder. The last burn left a patch of glowing embers sheltered in the hollow of a fallen tree, and the wind hasn't finished it off yet. You squat at the edge, feeling the heat puff against your face, and realize this is a chance to take it with you. Not the whole thing, of course. Fire doesn't move like an animal. You can't herd it, but maybe you can carry a piece. Your hands hover over the glow, but the heat forces you back. You break off a dead branch from the ground, a long one, so you don't have to lean in and push it toward the coals. The dry bark catches almost instantly, tiny flames licking up the side. It's alive in your hands now, and you feel a strange mix of triumph and fear. Your companions watch, murmuring low sounds of interest and alarm. You wave the branch slightly and see the flames grow brighter. You're holding something dangerous and precious, and every instinct screams, don't let it die. But carrying fire is tricky. You can't run. You can't squeeze through narrow gaps in the rocks without crushing it. Every gust of wind threatens to blow it out, or worse, blow it toward your body. You quickly learn to keep the burning end downwind, the other end tilted towards your shoulder. The heat travels up the wood, and if you hold it too long in one place, it begins to char your grip. Your solution? Wrap your hand with green leaves, or a strip of damp bark, to block the heat. The walk back to camp is slower than usual. The air smells faintly of smoke now, not just from the branch, but from you. Bits of ash drift past your eyes. You pass a patch of scrub and feel the temptation to test the flame, to see if it will leap from your branch to the dry twigs. You resist, mostly because the others are watching, and no one wants to sleep on ground that's burning. At camp, there's no prepared place for it. You don't yet have hearths or fire pits. Instead, you choose a bare patch of dirt near a cluster of rocks, hoping they'll block the wind. You pile up some dry grass, dead leaves, and small twigs. The burning branch works better than you imagined. Touch it to the pile, and the dry fibers burst into flame with a rush of heat and light. Suddenly, the camp is bathed in orange. Everyone flinches, but no one moves away completely. Now comes the real challenge, keeping it alive. The small flames consume the grass in seconds, the twigs in minutes. You learn to feed it constantly, moving from small sticks to thicker branches. Too much at once, and the flames smother. Too little, and it dies before you can add more. You stay crouched beside it for hours, eyes half-lidded from the smoke, arms sore from breaking wood. It's exhausting, but the reward is immediate. Warmth in the cool evening, a soft light that stretches the day, and a subtle sense that predators won't cross that glowing boundary. The first night you keep it, no one sleeps deeply. The flames snap and hiss. Sometimes sparks jump, making everyone startle. The smoke drifts into eyes and noses, making you cough. But the cold doesn't bite as hard, and for once, the darkness feels less like a trap and more like a wall you've built. In the morning, the flames are gone, but the ashes are still warm. You poke through them and find a few small pieces of charcoal still glowing red at the core. You blow gently, watching the orange return, and feed it thin grass until the flames reappear. This is the breakthrough. You don't have to wait for lightning anymore, at least not every time. If you guard it carefully, you can make yesterday's fire into today's. Carrying it from place to place becomes a skill in itself. You learn to bury embers in a bundle of dry moss or bark and keep it smouldering during travel. The best carriers are thick pieces of half-burned wood, charred on one end, but still solid enough to hold together for hours. You sling them under one arm or hold them out in front, walking steadily so the wind keeps them alive without flaring too hot. It's not just about having it, it's about knowing where it will survive. Wet ground kills it. Too much wind scatters it. You find that rock overhangs, hollow logs, or shallow pits dug into sand can keep a small fire alive overnight, and you begin to assign the task. Someone always stays behind to watch it, if the rest go hunting or foraging. Losing fire now feels like losing food or water. It's not an abstract tool, it's part of survival. Your group starts to notice the secondary effects. Meat left too close to the fire tastes different, softer. Roots and tubers that were once too hard or bitter become edible after roasting. The smoke keeps insects away, not all, but enough to matter when you're sleeping. Sometimes during damp nights, you huddle around it just to dry your hair and skin. Of course, not every attempt succeeds. There are days when the wind shifts suddenly and the flames leap toward your shelters. One careless ember can set dry grass roofs smouldering. The smell of burning hair teaches you to keep it further from your body. There are burns, blistered palms, scorched arms. But these are the prices of learning. Over time, you begin to collect better fuel. Not all wood burns the same. Some flares bright, but dies fast. Others smolder for hours with steady heat. You learn to strip bark from fallen branches for tinder, to keep dry twigs bundled in animal hide for the moment you need them. You even notice that old, half-burned pieces from past fires seem to catch more easily, as though they remember the flames. There's a strange satisfaction in watching the embers at night. You sit cross-legged, feeding it slowly, seeing the shadows stretch and shrink with each flicker. It's hypnotic, almost like staring at running water, but warmer, more dangerous. You find yourself talking more at night, gesturing with hands lit orange from below. The conversations aren't about fire yet. There's no word for it, but the rhythm changes. You're not rushing to sleep to escape the dark. You're lingering. It changes travel too. Now you can risk moving into cooler regions, knowing you can bring warmth with you. You choose paths that pass by dry wood sources. You rest near rock shelters where smoke can escape through cracks. Sometimes you leave behind small piles of charred wood as markers, proof to anyone passing later that someone here knew the secret. Predators notice as well. Some keep their distance, skirting wide around your camp. Others test the edges, lions pacing just outside the glow, eyes catching the light like green coins. When they don't attack, your confidence grows. You start sleeping in smaller, more open spaces because you trust the circle of flame. The process of scavenging becomes more deliberate. You don't just follow smoke now, you follow it with purpose, ready to harvest glowing logs or embers from the edges of a dying burn. Sometimes you split the group, one to chase game fleeing the flames, the other to capture the fire itself. You're no longer just witnesses to fire, you're thieves of it. Every successful carry reinforces the idea that this is yours to keep. If you're careful, you start to look for ways to make it last longer. Maybe you cover part of the fire with wet grass to slow the burn, or bury embers in ash to keep them insulated. These experiments aren't conscious science, but trial and error over hundreds of attempts. And with each success, the fear changes. You still respect it, still jump back when it flares unexpectedly, but you no longer see it as purely a threat. It's a companion now, one you feed and guard, one that rewards your attention. You can't make it from nothing yet, but you can keep it. And that's almost as good. By the time a generation passes, the skill has become a tradition. Younger members learn to carry embers before they can even make their own tools. The task is shared, but the knowledge where to find the best fuel, how to shield it from rain, how to wake it from slumber, is passed with quiet pride. You don't know it yet, but this is one of the most significant leaps your species will ever make. You've gone from fearing fire to protecting it, from fleeing its heat to sleeping beside it. And the world is already starting to bend around that change. The first time you try to keep fire going for more than a day, you fail. Not because you were careless at least, not in your mind, but because you underestimated how much it eats. The night had been long and damp. A fine mist drifted down from the sky. By morning, your precious embers were cold, buried in grey ash that no amount of blowing would bring back to life. You dig deeper, fingertips smudged black, searching for that faint orange glow. Nothing. The fire is gone. The mood in the group shifts immediately. Without fire, the night will be darker, colder, and less safe. The smell of smoke fades from your skin and hair, and it feels as though an invisible shield has been stripped away. You can't make it from nothing, so the only option is to find it again. The next 2 days are spent scanning the horizon for the thin column of smoke that means a new chance, until finally a dry season storm rolls in. Lightning strikes somewhere beyond the ridge, and you taste the metallic tang in the air. By nightfall, the grass is burning in the low valley, and you approach like a hunter stalking prey. This time you take more than you need. 2 thick branches glowing on one end, carried carefully back to camp. You've learned your lesson. Redundancy is survival. That's how it becomes routine. When you return from scavenging or hunting, the first thing you check is the fire. If the flames are too low, you feed them before you even drink water. At night, you position sleepers, so someone always has an eye on it. The role rotates. No one wants the responsibility all the time, but whoever tends it earns a certain quiet respect. In the deep hours, you watch the way the embers pulse when you blow on them, how they flare back to life with the smallest twig. The fire changes the space around you. You notice the ground beneath it turns hard and pale over time, as though the earth itself has been baked. The smell clings to everything: skins, hair, even the taste of water in your mouth. Sometimes the wind carries the scent far, announcing your presence to any animal or human downwind. This isn't always safe, but it also warns predators that something unusual waits here. And then gradually, a new idea forms. You could keep it in the same place, in a prepared spot, instead of just letting it burn wherever you drop the wood. At first, you scrape a shallow hollow in the dirt, ringed with stones scavenged from the riverbank. The rocks help block the wind and hold the heat longer, sometimes staying warm into the next day. Some crack and split with the heat, but others turn darker and smoother, their surfaces glazed. You start to prefer those for the fire circle. Keeping it in one spot makes other things easier. You can pile fuel nearby, keep dry bundles under overhangs, or wrapped in animal hides. You can scatter sleeping spaces around it, knowing its light reaches every face. There's a central place now, a fixed point in the camp. Without deciding it, you've created a hearth. The hearth changes your nights. Before, the dark would press in from every direction, and your group would huddle close together for warmth, sleeping light and waking at the smallest rustle. Now, there's a radius of light and heat that belongs to you. The shadows flicker and shift on the walls of your shelter. Sparks drift upward like tiny red insects disappearing into the black. It's mesmerizing. You talk more, even laugh sometimes. Your face is lit from below in strange, warm colors. The practical uses grow too. You learn to hold meat on a stick, just close enough to cook without burning. You roast roots until their bitter sting softens into sweetness. Even hard nuts crack more easily after being warmed. Some foods that once made you sick, tough seeds, stringy tubers, become edible. You don't know it yet, but heat is breaking down fibers and neutralizing toxins, giving your body more energy from the same plants and animals, and that energy fuels your brain. Over generations, this will be one of the forces driving its growth. Cooking means you spend less time chewing, no more hours gnawing on raw meat until your jaw aches. You can eat more quickly, store more calories, and spend the saved time on other tasks. Fire is quietly reshaping your daily rhythm. It also buys you time after sunset. Before, the day ended when the light faded. Hunting, gathering, crafting tools, all of it stopped in the dark. But fire extends the usable hours. You can scrape a hide by the firelight, or sharpen a flake of stone without rushing. You can tell stories or whatever passes for them in this time, about the day's hunt or the strange noises you heard in the hills. These conversations build bonds. You begin to recognize voices, gestures, and expressions in a new way. The predators still come, but they keep their distance. You've seen the reflection of eyes beyond the glow, pairs of them, sometimes shifting back and forth. The fire might not scare every animal, but it's enough to make them hesitate. That hesitation can be the difference between life and death when you're asleep. Some nights, the weather tests you. A sudden rain hisses as it hits the flames, and panic flares in your chest. You rush to cover it with a flat piece of bark, leaving just enough gap for air, or drag the coals into the shallow overhang of a nearby rock face. You huddle around it, shielding it with your bodies. Sometimes you lose the fight, but often you win, and the coals survive until morning. These moments feel like saving a wounded animal, You've protected something fragile, and it has repaid you with survival. You begin to see which woods are better for keeping the fire alive overnight. Dense hardwoods smolder long after softer woods collapse into ash. Pieces with thick bark can hide a glowing core even after the surface turns black. You keep these in a special pile, away from the quick-burning sticks you use for cooking. This is fuel management, though you don't have words for it. With time, scavenging fire from natural sources becomes less frantic. You have a system now, a hearth, stored fuel, techniques for sheltering flames from wind and rain. You don't need to chase every column of smoke you see, but when you do approach a wildfire, it's with a different mindset, not desperation, but opportunity. You gather the largest glowing branches you can carry, knowing they'll last longer back at camp. Sometimes you even split into teams, one to follow game fleeing the burn, another to harvest fire itself. This scavenging has risks. Wildfires don't always burn predictably. Winds shift, sending flames racing towards you in seconds. Smoke blinds you, your eyes stream with tears as you navigate the heat. There's also competition. Other humans might be watching the same fire, and encounters aren't always friendly, but the reward is worth the risk. Fresh fuel, perhaps hotter and cleaner than your own tired embers. Keeping fire changes how you see the land. You notice which trees are dry enough to catch easily, which grasses make the best tinder, which stones crack open after being heated. You find yourself seeking shelters with natural ventilation to clear smoke, or ridges where wind can fan a small flame without blowing it out. You're reading the landscape differently now, not just for food or water, but for fire. It's also shifting your movement patterns. You don't wander as far from camp in the evenings, knowing you'll need to be back to tend the hearth. Camps last longer in one place, since you've invested in preparing the fire spot and storing fuel. The hearth becomes the center of your home range, the anchor you return to after foraging trips. In the dark, it's the point you navigate toward, following the faint glow. Somewhere along the way, you stop thinking of fire as something borrowed from the wild. It's yours now, or at least it feels that way. You still can't create it at will, but you can keep it alive for weeks, even months. That's long enough to pass it from one season to the next, from one camp to another, long enough for a child to grow up, never knowing a night without its light. And perhaps most tellingly, you start to miss it when it's gone, not just for warmth or safety, but for the way it makes the night less empty. Without fire, the dark feels heavier again, the silence sharper. With it you feel bigger somehow, as if you've claimed a piece of the world that was never meant to be yours. If you could step into the deep past and watch Homo erectus at work around 1.5 million years ago, you'd notice something instantly. The signs of fire aren't accidental anymore. In certain places, sheltered caves, riverbanks, open clearings, there are patches of ground stained with ash, scattered charcoal, and bones that tell a story even without words. This is not the chaos left by a wildfire. This is the residue of people who lived with fire long enough to leave it behind in layers. Take Wonderwork Cave in southern Africa, for example. Imagine crouching just inside its wide mouth, where the air is cool but carries the faint tang of smoke. The walls are a soft reddish brown, worn smooth by countless hands and shoulders passing through. In the dirt beneath you, there's a smear of black, a layer only a few centimeters thick, but packed with fine ash and tiny fragments of bone, some of them charred. This isn't a place where lightning struck. This is a place where fire was brought in and kept. You poke at the ash with a stick and uncover a cracked bone, burned enough to change color but not destroyed. It's from a small antelope, the edges still sharp where stone tools cut through. That's another clue. Cut marks plus burning mean this wasn't just an animal that happened to die in a fire. It was processed, cooked, and eaten. And that's a leap in behavior, turning fire into part of a deliberate sequence of actions, not just an opportunistic snack. Other sites tell similar stories. At Kubifora in Kenya, layers of baked earth and reddened stone hint that hearths were built in open areas, their heat altering the soil itself. At Jesha Benot Yaakov in the Jordan Valley, archaeologists have found concentrations of burnt seeds, nuts, and fish bones alongside stone tools. These weren't random fires, these were controlled, purposeful. Control doesn't mean perfected, though. Fire in these early camps was still fragile, something to be guarded and maintained constantly. The hearths weren't the tidy stone rings you might imagine. They were often just patches of scorched ground, sometimes bordered by whatever rocks or logs were at hand. Yet the effect was profound. Here was a central place where life happened. Food was processed, tools were repaired, skins were scraped, and conversations, or at least vocal exchanges, flowed. Imagine one of those days. You're part of a group of Homo erectus sheltering near a bend in the river. The air is dry, and the ground is littered with thorny branches and driftwood. In the center of your clearing, a shallow depression in the dirt cradles a small fire. Someone is turning a stick to keep the flames even. Another is breaking long bones with a heavy stone, then placing the fragments close enough to the heat to roast the marrow inside. The smell is rich, fat hissing, smoke rising in lazy curls. You can hear the occasional pop as a seed or bit of resin bursts in the flames. Around you, tools are being worked. A flint flake is struck from a larger core, its edge catching the firelight in a razor-thin gleam. Someone else uses a pointed stick, hardened at one end by holding it in the coals, to dig at the sandy soil for edible roots. This simple trick, fire-hardening wood, means the point will last longer, resist splintering, and pierce deeper. Without fire, you'd have a softer, blunter tool. The fire changes, not just the tools, but the pace of life. With warmth at night, there's less need to retreat early, to shelters or huddle purely for heat. With cooked food, mealtime is faster and more predictable. With light after sunset, you can finish tasks you would have abandoned before. Each of these shifts frees up more time and energy for other things, exploring, planning, maybe even experimenting with new ways to use the fire itself. And there's another layer to it: safety. In open country, your campfire is a boundary. Predators are wary of its light and smell, approaching more cautiously than they would a silent, dark camp. At night, you can hear the cough of a leopard in the distance, the shuffle of hyenas skirting the edge of the glow. They linger, but they don't rush in. You're not untouchable, but you're less vulnerable. Sites like Wonderwork suggest that this wasn't an isolated event. The evidence stretches across continents, hinting that once Homo erectus learned to use fire, the skill spread rapidly. This makes sense. Fire doesn't just make survival easier, it makes it more flexible. You can push into cooler regions, spend more time in open areas without retreating from the cold, and process a wider range of foods. Consider the mental leap involved. It's one thing to stumble upon a wildfire's leftovers and grab a roasted carcass. It's another to think, we can bring this into our space. We can feed it. We can keep it alive. That's planning, cooperation, and an understanding, however intuitive, of cause and effect. If you add fuel, the fire grows. If you shield it from wind, it survives. If you let it die, you must wait for nature to bring it back. There's also the question of how long a single fire might last. Without matches, lighters, or modern fire-making tools, the easiest way to start a fire is not to let it go out. In a stable camp, that might mean keeping embers alive for weeks or months. In a more mobile group, it means devising ways to carry coals or glowing sticks from one site to another. Either way, there's continuity. A fire that burns across multiple days and nights becomes a kind of silent member of the group, always present, always tended. You can picture the routine. Someone wakes at night to feed the fire, stirring the coals, adding a branch or two. In the morning, others gather fuel before the sun is high, hauling logs or breaking branches to size. Cooking happens in the center. Tool making and hideworking happen at the edges, close enough for light, but far enough to avoid sparks. When the wind picks up, the group shifts their seating to the sheltered side, turning the hearth into a hub of movement and adaptation. The archaeological traces match this picture. In controlled fire sites, you often see a mix of burnt and unburnt bone fragments, suggesting repeated cooking and discard. You find stone tools with tiny traces of heat damage, probably from being left too close to the flames. You even find concentrations of specific plant remains, nuts, seeds, that indicate people were intentionally bringing certain foods to the fire. One of the most telling clues is the spatial patterning. At some sites, the hearth area is distinct from sleeping areas, and both are distinct from where butchering took place. That suggests planning of space, an early form of organizing a home base. Fire isn't just a random feature, it's central to the layout. The ability to use fire this way would have changed migration patterns. In cooler seasons or regions, a hearth could mean the difference between thriving and barely surviving. It also allowed expansion into areas that were previously inhospitable, not just for warmth, but for cooking otherwise inedible plants or for scaring off unfamiliar predators. It's worth noting that Homo erectus was already an impressive traveller. Their remains are found from Africa to parts of Asia and Europe. Fire may not have been the sole driver of that spread, but it certainly made the journey easier. You can picture a band moving along a river valley in the Lant, carrying embers wrapped in green leaves, lighting a new hearth each night, and leaving behind faint scars in the soil that millennia later scientists would find. What's striking is that this mastery wasn't a sudden invention. It was a slow accumulation of observations, trials, and errors. Generations would have passed between the first tentative ember carriers and the communities that could rely on a hearth as a permanent fixture, and every step along that path reinforced the same lesson. Fire, once tamed, is a partner. When you stand at the edge of one of these ancient hearth sites in your mind's eye, you can almost hear the low hum of voices, the crackle of wood, the rhythmic clink of stone on stone. You can feel the shared focus on that small, glowing center, where danger and necessity meet. And you know deep down that without moments like this, without the deliberate bringing of fire into human spaces, the story of our species would have turned out very differently. You've been roasting meat and tubers for so long now that you can barely remember what they were like raw. The tough sinew, the bitter bite of certain roots, the endless chewing, those belong to another life. Cooking isn't just a convenience anymore. It's the standard. Every time you put food into the flames, you're changing more than taste. You're rewriting the biology of your body and the rhythm of your day. Start with meat. Before fire, you tear into muscle fibers like a predator, relying on jaw strength and persistence. Even then, a lot of what you swallowed would pass through undigested. Now, a quick roasting denatures the proteins, loosens the fibers, and makes every bite softer. You get more calories with less work, and the flavor-richer, more complex, pulls you back to the hearth every time. Fat melts into the coals, sizzling and hissing, releasing scents that trigger hunger even if you've already eaten. Roots and tubers, things you once ignored, unless desperate, are transformed. Some that would have poisoned you raw are safe after cooking. Starchy ones, once dense and chalky, become sweet and filling. You find yourself collecting more of them, even in seasons when meat is plentiful. Their long cooking time becomes part of the evening routine. Bury them in the ashes while the sun is still up, and by nightfall they're ready to split open, steam curling into the dark. Nuts too benefit. Eating them loosens their shells and deepens their taste. The same goes for certain seeds, which release a nutty aroma after a brief roast. Even fish caught in shallow pools or trapped in low riverbeds can be laid over embers, their skin crisping, their flesh flaking apart. The smoky tang lingers on your fingers long after the meal ends. It's not just about what you can eat, it's about what your body can do with it. Cooking breaks down fibers and starches, letting your digestive system pull more energy from the same weight of food. That energy goes somewhere, into your muscles for longer hunts, into your brain for longer stretches of focus, into the ability to survive leaner times without collapsing. Over generations, these changes ripple outward. Children grow with slightly less strain on their jaws. The shape of teeth and faces shifts subtly. The time once spent endlessly chewing can be spent on other things, making tools, exploring new terrain, or just as important, sitting together around the fire. The social changes are just as profound as the physical ones. Cooking creates a natural pause in the day, a shared moment when the group gathers. You don't scatter to eat alone the way you might with raw food. Instead, you linger near the heat, waiting for the food to be ready, sharing pieces as they come off the fire. Even without words, there's exchange, passing a cooked root to another, pulling apart meat for someone older or younger, gesturing to warn against grabbing something too hot. There's hierarchy here too. The one who tends the fire keeps it alive, manages the cooking, holds a quiet authority. They decide when something is ready, when it's safe to eat, and how much goes to who. In some groups, this might be the strongest hunter. In others, it might be the person most skilled at reading the fire's moods. Either way, the role is respected, because everyone knows what happens when the fire dies or the food burns. Cooking also opens the door to food sharing beyond the immediate kill. Meat can be cooked and eaten over hours instead of devoured in one raw feast. Roots can be roasted and kept warm in the ashes until morning. Even fish can be smoked slightly over a low fire, slowing spoilage. This creates something new, the possibility of storing energy for later, smoothing the feast or famine cycle that has defined so much of life until now. The taste itself becomes a motivator. You find yourself craving the smoky richness of cooked food, even when raw is available. That craving drives the urge to protect the fire at all costs. Without it, you'd be forced back to chewing sinew and enduring bitter flavors. With it, every meal is easier, safer, and more satisfying. There's also the safety factor. Cooking kills parasites and harmful bacteria that would have thrived in raw meat or certain plants. You don't know the microbiology, of course, but you know the pattern. Those who eat cooked food are less likely to sicken afterward. Illness still comes, but it's less frequent, and recovery is faster. That means fewer weak members slowing the group during a migration, fewer deaths that leave children unprotected. In the glow of the firelight, meals become more than eating. They become events. You sit in a loose circle, faces half lit, half shadowed, hands working methodically as you pass food around. There's a rhythm. Reach toward the fire, blow on the hot piece, chew slowly, glance at others to see their reaction. Sometimes someone mimics the sound of the sizzling meat or gestures dramatically at a piece too hot to handle, earning low, breathy laughter from the rest. The light allows something else too. You can see expressions clearly, even after sunset. A smile, a frown, a raised eyebrow, all visible in the flicker. This sharpens your ability to read others, to anticipate moods or reactions. Around the fire, your senses shift, your eyes adjusting to the warm light, your ears attuned to the subtle crack of twigs in the dark beyond, your nose sorting the mingled scents of smoke, food and earth. It's easy to imagine how, over thousands of nights like this, cooking became intertwined with every other part of life. Courtship, alliance building, planning hunts, all could happen in the extended hours firelight created. The meal was the anchor, the point around which conversation and cooperation could grow. And sometimes, cooking was a show of skill, the right combination of wood for flavor, the patience to keep embers at the perfect heat, the knowledge of how to place the food just far enough from the flames. These were noticed. Those who excelled could feed more people with the same resources, or turn an unpromising catch into something worth eating. On certain nights, the cooking fire might even draw in others, travelers, neighboring groups, attracted by the smell and glow. A shared meal could ease tensions, turn strangers into allies, or at least delay conflict until daylight. Fire became not just a tool, but a signal. Here is food, here is warmth, here is life. The taste of cooked food began to shape memory itself. You remembered not just the hunt or the gathering, but the smell and flavor of the meal that followed. That memory could pull you towards certain places, riverbanks where fish had been roasted, clearings where roots grew plentiful, hills where game had been cooked on open flames. The landscape became a map of meals as much as a map of waterholes or shelters. Over time, your cooking experiments expanded. You learned that wrapping food in wet leaves before burying it in ashes kept it moist. You discovered that certain woods gave a sweeter smoke, while others made the food bitter. You found that hollowed bones could be set near the fire to warm water or fat, making primitive broths or softening tough greens. Each discovery deepened your relationship with the fire, turning it from a simple source of heat into a tool for transformation. The difference between groups with fire and those without grew stark. Fire users could settle in more varied environments, withstand colder nights, and access foods others couldn't eat safely. This wasn't just an advantage, it was a leap forward in survival strategy, and cooking was at the heart of it. You can imagine the pride of a group returning from a hunt, not just with meat, but with the certainty of how it will be prepared. The younger ones watch closely, learning where to place the food, how to turn it, how to test it without burning fingers. They taste the difference between undercooked and perfect, between meat dropped in the flames and meat slow roasted on a stick. These lessons aren't written down, but they're etched into habit, passed from one hand to the next, one night to the next, and slowly cooking shifts from being a novelty to a necessity. You no longer think in terms of raw versus cooked, you think in terms of edible and inedible, and for most things, edible now means touched by fire. You've crossed a threshold. Fire isn't just part of your life, it's part of you. By now, the fire has done more than change what you eat. It has changed where and how you spend your nights. Before fire, darkness was a warning. As the sun dipped below the horizon, your world shrank to a narrow circle of sound and smell. You huddled close to others, listening for the snap of twigs in the brush, the low rumble of a predator's breath. Every shadow was a threat. Now the shadows are pushed back by a trembling orange glow, and the space around you feels yours. It starts simply. A small group of you sitting near the flames after eating, too full to move, yet too alert to sleep. The light flickers over faces, throwing long shadows on the ground. You notice details you might have missed in daylight. The way smoke curls and twists before vanishing into the night sky. The tiny sparks that float upward like glowing insects. Your hands are warm, your back is cool, and the air carries the mingled scents of ash, roasted food, and the faint musk of those around you. The fire's warmth is part of it, but so is the light. You can see each other clearly, even hours after sunset. Expressions become sharper, easier to read. Gestures and subtle shifts of posture carry more meaning when they can be seen, not just guessed. You find yourself talking more, not with words as you know them today, but with sounds, grunts, laughter, and the kind of hand movements that make ideas visible. And there's something else. The fire buys you time. Without it, night would be for sleep, huddled close until dawn. With it, you have hours of wakefulness, in a space that feels safe. You use that time. First, it's practical work. Someone reshapes the edge of a stone flake, the bright sparks from each strike briefly competing with the firelight. Another scrapes the skin of an animal, the rhythmic motion easier to sustain without shivering in the cold. Someone else sharpens a fire-hardened digging stick, rotating it slowly to evenly char the point. Then come the quieter activities, things you might not have done without the glow to see by. You sort through gathered plants, separating what will be cooked tomorrow from what can be eaten now. You inspect a half-finished spear, running fingers along the shaft for imperfection. You pluck burrs from your fur, or pick them from a companion's hair, an act as social as it is useful. Over time, these evenings take on a different tone. The fire isn't just a source of light, it's a center, a stage. You sit facing inward, your knees almost touching, eyes drawn to the restless movement of the flames. The crackle and pop of burning wood become a kind of background music, steady and soothing. You start to hum, to tap sticks together in rhythm. Maybe someone mimes a hunt, their shadow dancing wildly on the ground behind them, drawing soft laughter from the rest. This is the seed of storytelling. Without a shared language, it's still possible to replay the day's events, to show how the antelope leapt, or how the fish slipped from a grasp. Hands mimic the movements. Voices shift pitch to imitate sounds. The cough of a leopard, the chatter of birds, the whistle of wind in a canyon. You've always communicated, but here by the fire, you can do it longer, with more attention from those around you. The light makes it possible, the safety makes it sustainable. Some nights are about planning. You trace shapes in the dirt with a stick, pointing toward where the river bends or where you saw fresh tracks. You demonstrate how the fire can be moved, wrapping embers in bark, holding them carefully in a bundle of green leaves, and assign who will carry it tomorrow. The firelight lets you see the agreement in others' eyes, the nods and small sounds that confirm the plan. And inevitably, there are nights for nothing at all, just staring into the flames, your mind wandering. It's easy to lose track of time this way, watching a log collapse into glowing fragments, then poking them back together so they flare again. The flames seem to move with purpose, curling and twisting like living things. You find yourself thinking of them almost as a creature, one that eats wood, breathes air, and dies if neglected. This shared experience does something subtle to the group. Without fire, your interactions are tied to daylight and immediate survival tasks. With fire, you have a place to gather, even when nothing urgent demands it. That gathering reinforces bonds, trust built not just in the hunt or the fight, but in the quiet, in the exchange of warmth and light. Predators sense the change too. The fire doesn't make you invincible, but it creates a zone of hesitation. Hyenas circle at a distance, pacing just beyond the edge of the glow. Leopards watch from trees, their eyes catching light but not crossing the invisible boundary. Even snakes seem less likely to slither into the warmth, perhaps sensing the vibration or heat. You still keep watch. There's always the chance that hunger or desperation will drive an animal closer, but the pressure eases. You can doze lightly, waking only to toss a branch on the fire, knowing others will do the same. You can drift in and out of dreams without the constant dread of claws in the dark. The fire also makes new kinds of movement possible. Without it, you'd avoid traveling far from a sleeping site by night. With it, you can carry torches, branches wrapped in dry grass, lit at the end to light the way. The first time you see a group walking through the dark this way, it's unsettling. Small pockets of orange light bobbing through the blackness, casting long jerky shadows on the ground. But the effect is undeniable. You can see hazards underfoot, spot the reflection of predator eyes before they're too close, and signal to others from a distance. Torches open up the possibility of nighttime hunting, at least in certain conditions. You might drive small animals from burrows or flush birds from roosts. More often, they're used to retrieve something forgotten or to scout an area before settling for the night. In rare cases, you even use them to frighten predators away from a fresh kill, claiming meat you wouldn't have dared to approach in full darkness. The fire becomes a marker of home. When you leave camp for the day, you glance back at the thin column of smoke curling upward, reassured that it will still be there when you return. At night, after hours away, you spot the glow through the trees and feel the instinctive pull toward it. The same way you're drawn to water or shelter. It's more than heat, more than light. It's the center of your world. Over time, the hours spent around the fire create layers of memory. You recall not just hunts and meals, but moments of connection, The night the rain drove you all into a shallow cave, and the fire smoked so badly your eyes streamed. The time a log split, suddenly, sending sparks into the air and making everyone flinch. The night a stranger approached from the dark, drawn by the smell of roasting meat. In these moments, the fire is both tool and witness. It sees your triumphs and your mistakes. It holds your attention long enough for patterns to form, plans, traditions, habits that will pass to the next generation. It shapes the way you spend time together, and in doing so, it shapes what you can imagine. The difference is visible, even in the daytime. Groups with fire carry themselves differently. They linger in places longer, build camps with central spaces, and move fuel as deliberately as they move food or water. Children grow up learning to stay a safe distance, to feed the flames correctly, to read the smoke for signs of trouble. The idea that night is purely for hiding has faded. Night is now for gathering, for planning, for simply existing in a space that feels owned. And perhaps most surprisingly, the fire changes your relationship to the sky. With light at night, you notice more constellations forming patterns. The way the moon's glow shifts through its cycle. The streak of a meteor across the blacks. Before, you might have seen these things in brief moments before exhaustion closed your eyes. Now you can sit awake, staring upward, with the fire warm at your side. The stars become as familiar as the faces around you. It's easy to forget, in the comfort of modern nights, what a leap this was. Firelight didn't just push back the dark. It gave you hours of life you'd never had before. Hours you could fill with work, play, planning, or simply being together. Those hours would shape the way humans thought, acted, and related to one another for every generation that followed. The ground under the fire has changed. What was once just a bare patch of dirt is now a shallow bowl lined with stones. You've chosen deliberately, ones that don't shatter from heat, ones that hold warmth long after the flames die. Around it, there's a ring of ash and charcoal from dozens of nights. The smell is permanent now, clinging to the stones, to your skin, to every hide you wear. This is no longer just a campfire. This is a hearth. A hearth means you've stopped letting the fire choose its place. You choose for it. You think about wind direction, drainage when it rains, and how close it is to where you sleep. If you're near water, you might build it on slightly higher ground to keep it dry. If you're in a cave, you place it where the smoke can escape without choking everyone. These decisions are instinct at first, but they're repeated so often that they become shared knowledge. The stones are more than decoration. They trap heat, so that even after the flames burn low, you can sit near the hearth and feel warmth radiating from the circle. In the morning, the stones closest to the coals are still hot enough to burn your fingers. You can use them to warm food, to heat water held in animal stomachs or bark containers, even to soothe sore muscles. Sometimes you bury them in the earth under your bedding to keep the chill from seeping in during the coldest nights. The hearth also gives you control over the size and shape of the fire. You can build it small and hot for cooking, or spread it out wide for warmth. You can rake coals to one side for slow roasting while keeping the other side bright and blazing for light. You can shield one edge with a half circle of stones to block the wind. This control makes the fire last longer and use less fuel, a crucial advantage when wood is scarce. It becomes the fixed point of your camp. Everything else, sleeping spots, tool-making areas, refuse piles, arranges itself around it. You know where people will gather at night, where food will be cooked, where warmth will come from. You can leave for hours and return to find someone tending it, adding a branch, stirring the coals. In caves, the hearth transforms the whole space. The flicker of the flames makes the walls come alive, shadows dancing over stone. You notice marks, scratches, stains, natural patterns that you never saw before. Sometimes, without really knowing why, you trace shapes in the soot with your fingers. Other times you leave bits of charred wood or animal bones in small piles, as though the hearth's presence demands a kind of offering. The fire draws everyone in, even during the day. On cold, windy mornings, people gather close to warm their hands before setting out. Children squat beside it, fascinated by the way twigs shrink and curl in the flames. Older members sit quietly nearby, eyes half closed, soaking in the heat. The hearth becomes a place for passing on skills: how to carve a sharper point, how to wrap sinew around a spearhead, how to cut hide for lashing. The light and warmth make it easier to see, easier to work. Managing the hearth takes skill. You learn to bank the fire at night by piling on larger logs and covering part of the embers with ash, slowing the burn. In the morning, you rake back the ash to reveal the hidden glow, feed it thin sticks, and watch it spring back to life. You begin to recognize the sounds of a healthy fire: the steady hiss of sap boiling off fresh wood, the low hum of coals burning evenly. You know when it's too wet, too smoky, or too close to dying. Over time, you start to experiment. You notice that stones heated in the hearth can be moved to other parts of camp to radiate warmth where there is no fire. You discover that a shallow pit lined with hot stones and covered with earth can cook meat slowly for hours, making it tender and rich. You learn that certain stones explode when overheated, sending shards flying, a lesson that leaves scars. The hearth also changes how you use the surrounding landscape. You scout for good fuel, not just daily, but days in advance, storing dry branches in sheltered spots. You know which trees drop the best kindling, which shrubs burn hottest, and which woods fill the air with choking smoke best avoided. You begin to gather dried animal dung as fuel in places where wood is scarce, especially on long journeys across open grasslands. You even start carrying stones from place to place. At first it's only when you move camp, a short distance, bringing a few from the old hearth to seed the new one. But gradually it becomes habit, because good stones are hard to find, and the right ones make a difference. You remember their weight, their smoothness, their resistance to cracking. In a way, they become part of your toolkit, as essential as a hand axe. In settled camps, the hearth becomes more than one. You might have a main fire for warmth and cooking, and smaller ones for specialized tasks: drying hides, smoking meat, hardening wooden tools. These smaller fires are easier to manage, less likely to send smoke into your eyes, and keep the main hearth free for other uses. The organization around the hearth changes social patterns. There's a natural hierarchy in who sits closest: those who tend the fire, those with injuries, children who need the most warmth. Outsiders, or visitors, are usually kept a little further back until trust is earned. It's not formal, but everyone understands the arrangement. At night, the hearth is the pulse of the camp. The flames shrink and grow as people add fuel, talk, or drift into silence. Sparks leap upward and vanish into the black sky. You hear the soft crackle of wood, the murmur of voices, the shifting of bodies on packed earth. Even when you close your eyes, the orange glow seeps through your lids, a reminder that the fire is still alive. When storms come, the hearth becomes a fortress. You build windbreaks from hides or stacked stones, shielding the flames. You huddle together, the smoke swirling and clinging, while outside the wind howls and rain lashes the ground. The fire becomes the line between comfort and misery, between warmth and cold. Over generations, the knowledge of hearth building spreads. Children watch carefully as stones are arranged, as fuel is stacked, as embers are banked. They imitate the motions with small piles of pebbles and twigs, practicing on fires too small to be dangerous. The skill becomes part of identity. To know how to build and keep a hearth is to know how to survive. And when the time comes to move on, the hearth doesn't just vanish. You scatter the ashes, take the best stones, and leave behind a faint, blackened circle that will linger long after the last ember dies. Sometimes, months or years later, you might return to that same place and rebuild in the same spot, recognizing it by the shape of the ground, the memory of warmth. The hearth is more than a tool now. It's a place, a habit, a symbol. It marks where you've been and shapes where you'll go next. It ties you to the land in a new way, because wherever there's a hearth, there's home. The hearth has already transformed how you live, but fire's reach is extending far beyond cooking and warmth. You're beginning to see its potential for shaping the very tools you depend on. At first, it's subtle, an accident, even someone leaves a stone too close to the flames, and when they pick it up later, it flakes more easily under the strike of a hammerstone. The edges come off sharper, cleaner, and with less effort. That's the beginning of heat treatment. You start experimenting without thinking of it as experimentation. A stone that's been heated has a different feel under your fingers, almost glassier, less gritty. You notice that it breaks in predictable ways, the flakes travelling farther across its surface. This means fewer wasted strikes, fewer jagged edges that need reworking. With practice, you can make longer, thinner blades, ones that cut cleaner and last longer. Wood, too, changes under fire. You already know that charring the tip of a digging stick hardens it, making it more resistant to splintering. Now you apply the same principle to spears. You hold them just close enough to the heat to darken the wood, rotating slowly so the tip hardens evenly. It's not as sharp as stone, but it penetrates deeper than untreated wood, and it can be repaired in the field by rehardening it in any campfire. Bone, usually brittle and dry, can be warmed to make it more pliable before shaping. You begin to carve notches and smooth edges using heated bone, discovering that some pieces hold their shape better after being exposed to the flames. Eventually, you start using heat to help straighten warped shafts, laying them near the fire and pressing gently until they're aligned. Fire also allows you to work with substances you'd have ignored before. Resins from certain trees soften when warmed, becoming sticky enough to bind stone to wood. You heat the resin, smear it into the notch of a spear shaft, press in a flint point, and let it cool. The bond isn't permanent, but it's strong enough to survive a hunt. Without fire, that resin would stay hard and useless. Even the waste from the hearth becomes part of your toolkit. Charcoal, soft and dark, is perfect for marking surfaces, drawing hunting routes in the dirt, sketching animal tracks for others to recognize, or simply leaving symbols on rock walls. Ash, when mixed with animal fat, creates a paste that can help treat insect bites or rashes. You might not understand the chemistry, but you've learned through repetition that these things work. There's another, more dramatic use: controlling fire itself to shape the land. You've seen how wildfires leave behind open spaces where game gathers to graze on fresh shoots. Now, you're starting to set small, deliberate burns in dry grass near your camp. You choose the wind direction, light the grass at several points, and watch it sweep across the ground. The fire clears old growth, drives small animals into the open, and leaves behind a patch that will attract larger herds in weeks to come. At first, these burns are risky. You misjudge the wind, or the fire moves faster than you can control. But over time, you learn to pick days when the grass is dry enough to burn but the air is calm. You make fire breaks by scraping away grass in a line, stopping the flames from spreading too far. You realize that the smoke itself can be useful, masking your scent during a hunt or driving insects away from sleeping areas. Fire even begins to play a role in water gathering. On cold mornings, you notice that dew forms more heavily on plants after a fire has cleared the ground, perhaps because the new shoots attract it. You also learn that heating stones and dropping them into water-filled containers can bring the water to steaming, useful for cleaning tools, softening plants, or making tough meat easier to chew. The connection between fire and tools deepens with each generation. Children grow up watching their elders heat stones before flaking them, char wood before shaping it, soften resins before binding points. These techniques spread not just within a group, but between groups. When two bands meet, they trade more than food or hides. They exchange fire knowledge. Someone might show you a new wood that hardens especially well, or a stone that becomes almost translucent when heated. In return, you teach them how to control a grass fire or which resins hold longest in the rain. There's a certain prestige in being skilled with fire for toolmaking. A hunter with a hardened spear or a finely flaked blade has an edge over one without. Those who can produce such tools earn respect, and their work is valued. They might be given first choice of meat, or guaranteed help during a hunt. In this way, fire shapes not just tools, but social dynamics. The risks remain, of course. Stones can explode when overheated, sending shards into skin and eyes. Resin can flare unexpectedly, burning hands. A tool left too close to the flames can warp beyond use. These lessons are often learned painfully, and scars become the marks of experience. But the benefits outweigh the dangers. The more you work with fire, the more you see patterns. You notice that stones heated slowly and evenly produce the best flakes, that wood hardened too quickly becomes brittle, that certain bones crack if they dry too fast after heating. You begin to think ahead, building a smaller, slower fire for tool making, a hotter one for cooking, and a smoky, smouldering one for drying hides. The hearth becomes a workshop as much as a kitchen. This blending of uses means the fire is almost never out. If the cooking is done, the coals are kept alive for tool work. If the tool work is finished, the embers are banked for warmth. The constant presence of fire changes the way you think about your surroundings. You're always looking for fuel, for the right kind of stone, for the wood that burns at the right speed. It also changes the way you see other creatures. You notice that no animal manipulates fire the way you do. Birds might carry burning twigs accidentally, and some insects might thrive after a burn, but nothing else on the landscape uses fire as a tool. That realization, though you couldn't put it into words, marks a mental shift. Fire sets you apart. Even the act of making tools by firelight feels different. The glow highlights the edges of a flake, making it easier to see where the next strike should land. The warmth keeps your fingers nimble on cold nights, letting you work long, and there's a certain pleasure in sitting close, hearing the pop of resin, smelling the mix of smoke and stone dust, knowing that each tap of your hammerstone is guided by the fire's help. As your reliance on fire in toolmaking grows, so does your willingness to shape the environment for it. You might strip bark from trees to dry for future tinder, or cut green branches to make handles that won't burn when hafted to a heated point. You plan your movements, not just around water and game, but around places where you can gather both fuel and tool-making materials. Fire has become more than a reaction to nature. It's a way to bend nature to your needs. You've learned to heat, to harden, to shape, to bind. Each skill builds on the last, and all of them depend on that same flickering, dangerous ally in the center of your camp. Without it, you could still survive, but you could not do half the things you can now. The line between necessity and mastery is blurring. You no longer just keep fire alive. You use it deliberately, predictably, creatively, and in doing so, you've stepped further away from the life of every other creature on this planet. You've known the comfort of fire in warm lands, where the nights are cool but survivable. Now, you learn what it truly means in places where the cold can kill. The first time you feel an ice age wind in your bones, you understand, without fire, you wouldn't last a night. The air stings the inside of your nose, makes your breath feel heavy. Your fingers go numb quickly, clumsy and slow. Every gust seems to reach under your skin. Fire becomes more than a convenience. It is the thin wall between you and death. You hunch close to it, shoulders forward, hands cupped toward the flames, feeling the blood return in small, painful bursts. The heat doesn't just warm the surface. It pushes deep, loosening muscles that had begun to stiffen. The relief is almost dizzying. In these climates, the hearth grows larger. You feed it thicker logs, letting them burn down to dense beds of coals that hold heat for hours. You build windbreaks from piled snow or stacked stones, angling them so the smoke rises without being blown back into your shelter. The fire is no longer just in the center of the camp. It's the camp's anchor, the reason you can live here at all. You learn new ways to stretch its warmth. Stones heated in the fire can be buried under bedding made of hides or grasses, keeping you warm long after the flames fade. Some you place in water to heat it for washing or soaking food. Others you wrap in hide and carry inside your clothing, a mobile store of warmth against the day's cold. The cold also changes the way you gather fuel. In frozen forests, wood is often damp or covered in snow. You strip away outer layers to find the dry core, split thicker branches to expose wood that will catch. Sometimes you carry fuel with you from one camp to the next, knowing you may not find any before nightfall. In treeless plains, you burn dried animal dung. Its slow, steady heat a lifeline when there's nothing else. The cold drives you to experiment with shelter placement, always looking for places where the fire's heat can be trapped. A shallow cave with a narrow opening, a rock alcove that blocks the wind, even a pit dug into the ground. All of these become fire rooms, spaces where heat gathers instead of escaping into the air. Inside, the glow makes frost on the walls glisten, and the air smells of smoke and damp stone. Your relationship to clothing changes too. With fire you can dry hides until they're soft and wearable. You can warm stitching materials, sinew, plant fibers, so they don't stiffen and snap. You can warm yourself before stepping out to hunt or gather, and thaw out quickly on return. Fire turns a harsh, frozen landscape into something you can endure for weeks, even months. Cooking shifts as well. In the cold, fat becomes more valuable, and the fire is perfect for melting it from meat and bones. You collect it in hide pouches, drinking it hot or spreading it over cooked roots. The warmth in your stomach feels like a second fire, radiating outward. You roast meat longer, letting it dry slightly so it lasts longer in the frigid air. The cold keeps food from spoiling quickly, but fire makes it satisfying to eat in the moment. Hunting changes too. In the warmer lands, you could store little heat in your body. Now you warm yourself before a hunt, standing by the fire until your skin tingles. You may even carry a torch, not for light, but for quick warmth and pauses. On longer expeditions, you stop to build small fires, brief islands of heat in a sea of cold. The skill of starting or carrying fire becomes as important as tracking prey. The cold also sharpens your awareness of fire's other gifts. Smoke helps preserve meat and hides. You hang strips of both near the fire, letting them absorb its scent over hours or days. Smoked meat keeps longer in damp conditions, and smoked hides resist rot. In the Ice Age, this means security, a backup food supply, clothing that lasts the season. You notice too that predators seem fewer near your fire in these cold places. Perhaps it's because prey is scarce, and they don't waste energy approaching humans unless desperate. Or perhaps the smell of smoke carries further in the frozen air, warning them off. Still, you remain alert. Hunger can drive even cautious predators to risk a fire's edge. In these conditions, the fire becomes a constant presence. It burns day and night, its heat soaking into your bones so deeply that stepping away feels like stepping into another world. You sleep closer to it, waking only enough to feed it before drifting back into dreams. The crackle and hiss are as familiar as your own heartbeat. It changes the way you think about distance. In warm lands, you could roam far from the hearth without fear. Here, every step away must be measured against how quickly you can return to the heat. You plan your days in loops, out to gather wood or hunt, then back before the numbness sets in. You learn to read the sun's position, the feel of the wind, the bite of the air against your face. Travel between camps becomes a serious calculation. You plan routes based on where you can find shelter and fuel along the way. Sometimes you carry embers in insulated bundles of ash and hide, starting a new fire at each night's stop. Other times you risk traveling by day and building a full fire from scratch at night, a gamble that depends on dry tinder and calm weather. The memory of a night when the fire failed, when you woke stiff, teeth chattering, fingers refusing to bend, never leaves you. These cold environments teach you the importance of fire discipline. You can't afford to waste fuel on huge roaring flames when steady coals will do. You feed it evenly, tend it carefully, never letting it burn too low or flare too high. It's a living thing, but one that must be managed with precision. Over time, this discipline becomes part of the group's rhythm. Children learn early to add small sticks instead of big ones, to shield their faces when blowing on coals, to avoid scattering sparks onto hides. They play at building tiny fires in safe pits, practicing the skills they'll one day depend on. The Ice Age doesn't just test your survival, it deepens your bond with fire. In the warm lands, you could forget its value for a day or two. Here you never can. It is the center of every decision, the measure of every plan. Without it, you are not just cold, you are done. And so, fire stops being merely a tool. It becomes your partner, the other half of your existence in this frozen world. You guard it as you guard your own life, because in truth, they are the same thing now. By now, fire has seeped into every practical corner of your life, but its meaning is beginning to stretch beyond survival. You can feel it in the way people stare into the flames long after the meal is finished, their eyes distant, their bodies still. You see it in the way certain pieces of wood are chosen not for their burn quality, but for the way they smell when they catch. Fire is becoming more than fuel and heat. It's becoming part of the mind. The first sign of this is in how you treat fire during moments that have nothing to do with cooking or warmth. A band member dies during the cold season, and instead of leaving the body to scavengers or burying it quickly, you build a larger fire than usual. The wood crackles loudly in the still air, the heat licking your face even from several steps back. The flames become a kind of boundary, a glowing circle in which the group gathers, sitting silent. You place the body near enough that the smoke drifts over it, as if cleansing it, marking the passing with something brighter than darkness. Later you might burn certain plants, not because they cook food better, but because their smoke carries a sharp, distinctive scent. It curls into the air, drifting over the camp, mingling with the constant smell of ash and meat. You can't say exactly why you do it, only that the moment feels different with that scent in the air.
In some places you notice people making deliberate marks in the soot on cave walls near the hearth's glow, shapes that suggest animals, zigzags, handprint. These are not accidents of cooking smoke. They're placed there, in the reach of the light as though the fire is needed to see them properly. Without its glow, they fade into shadow. With it they seem alive.
You also find that the fire's light changes the way you see the world outside your camp. In the flicker, the familiar takes on a different shape. Someone's face becomes a shifting mask of light and shadow. The edges of a spear catch the glow and flare like a blade of dawn. The fire transforms not just objects, but the mood of the space. The night no longer feels like a single, solid block of dark. It's broken into zones, the glow, the shadow, and the unseen beyond. Ritual begins to creep into your firekeeping. You might always light it from a specific ember, if possible, or you might add certain twigs at the start of a hunt. You might gather at the hearth before moving camp, passing your hands briefly over the flames, as though taking some of its power with you. When the fire flares suddenly, throwing sparks high, making everyone glance up, you feel it as a sign, even if you can't say of what. Fire also becomes a marker of identity. Groups you meet in your travels have their own ways of tending it. Some prefer small, steady flames with little smoke. Others build high, roaring stacks that can be seen from far away. You notice that these habits are as recognizable as the tools they carry or the language they speak. You begin to see the fire not just as something you control, but as something that controls you. It draws you in, demands your time and attention, shapes where you stop and how you arrange your shelters. Its needs are constant. Feed it, protect it, guard it from wind and rain. In return, it gives you light, heat, cooked food, safety. The relationship feels mutual in a way your connection with other tools never has. There's also an element of performance now. Around the fire, gestures get bigger, movements more dramatic. Shadows leap up the cave walls when you raise your arms or swing a branch. Children mimic these movements, turning themselves into deer, lions, or birds for the amusement of the group. This shadow play becomes its own form of storytelling, silent but vivid, the firelight flickering across the performers' bodies. Fire's symbolic pull grows stronger during danger. Before a hunt, you might gather close, touching your weapons to the flames, as if they'll carry some of its strength into the chase. After a narrow escape, you sit by it longer, staring into it as if it holds the answers. It becomes a place where fear can settle, where tension can burn off in the slow collapse of logs into coals. You start to see it in dreams. The shifting orange light, the swirling smoke, the way the embers seem to pulse like breathing. It stays with you after you close your eyes. Sometimes you wake with the smell of smoke in your nose and a sudden urge to check the hearth to make sure it's still alive. As the role of fire expands, so do the ways you use it in marking time. You start to measure the length of certain tasks in the burning of a log or the turning of coals from red to grey. You notice that a particular piece of wood burns for the time it takes to finish shaping a spear, or that a bed of embers will last until the first light of dawn. The fire becomes your clock, your measure of night. Certain moments in the year seem tied to it as well. In colder months, the fire grows larger, becomes the unquestioned centre of the camp. In warmer months, it might shrink, used more for cooking and less for warmth, but still lit each night as the sky darkens. Over time, the lighting of the fire becomes a daily act of renewal, the rekindling of a shared heart. You also notice fire's effect on animals in ways that seem almost mysterious. Owls circle closer to catch moths drawn by the light. Small scavengers linger at the edge of the glow, darting in to snatch scraps. Insects swarm toward the flames, their bodies sizzling and vanishing in an instant. These patterns become part of your mental map of the night, the way you read the signs of the wild. Sometimes, fire becomes part of play. You toss green sticks into the flames to watch them hiss and sputter. You scatter handfuls of dried grass, just to see the sudden flare. Children drop stones into the coals to see them spit sparks. These moments are small, but they bind the group in shared amusement, breaking the long stretches of serious work and travel. And then there are the times when fire marks a change in the group itself. A child's first night sleeping with their own small ember bundle. A hunter's return with a torch lit from a distant camp. The first fire lit in a new shelter. The smoke curling up into a roof that has never held it before. These are moments when you feel that fire is not just a habit, but a sign of belonging, of continuity from one place to the next. Some groups even begin to carry certain embers for long periods, refusing to let them die unless absolutely necessary. These embers are wrapped in layers of bark, grass, and hide, tended like living things. They are not just practical, they are symbolic links to the places and people you've left behind. When you feed them into a new hearth, you carry the old into the new, binding one camp to the next. At night, when the fire burns low and only the embers remain, there is a particular quiet that settles over the group. The chatter fades, the shadows draw in, and the sound of the coals shifting becomes the loudest thing. This is when the fire feels most alive, breathing softly, holding its warmth deep inside, waiting for morning. You feel a strange kinship with it in these moments, as if you're both enduring the same night, waiting for the same dawn. You don't yet have words for belief, for ritual, for culture, but you have fire, and in it, the beginnings of all three. You've learned to guard fire, to carry it, to shape it, but you still can't summon it from nothing. That changes slowly, over countless tries, with countless failures. At first, you don't even think of fire making as a separate skill. You think of it as coaxing life back into something that has nearly died. You've done it with embers, blowing gently, feeding them dry grass, watching the glow turn to flame. But what if you could make that first spark without needing yesterday's coals? The earliest attempts are clumsy. You strike one rock against another, flint on flint, flint on quartz, because you've noticed sparks leap when they hit just right. The problem is, the sparks are tiny, vanishing before they find anything to catch. You try hitting them over piles of dry grass, over shredded bark, even over piles of downy seeds from plants. Most times, nothing happens. When something does, it's almost always an ember that dies before you can coax it further. You don't give up. You notice that some stones make hotter, brighter sparks than others. One in particular, a dense, glassy rock you later think of as flint, throws sparks so hot they leave faint scorch marks on dry leaves. You begin to carry pieces of it with you, testing them against different stones until you find one, rich in iron, that makes sparks fly with every strike. Then comes the next realization. Sparks die quickly in open air, but if they land on something ready to smolder, they'll stay alive long enough to grow. You start experimenting with tinder that catches easily, shredded bark rubbed between your hands until it's almost dust, fungus from rotting logs, dry moss kept safe inside your clothing. When a spark lands on the right material, it glows. You lean close, blow gently, and the glow spreads like the heartbeat of something waking. Add thin, dry grass, and suddenly flame. It doesn't happen often at first. Maybe one time in 20 you manage it, and it feels like magic every time. You guard those moments, showing them only to the most trusted members of your group, because now for the first time you have something even more valuable than carrying fire. You have the power to call it into being. Other methods emerge, sometimes by accident. Rubbing two sticks together quickly creates heat, enough to make smoke if the wood is dry and the groove is right. It's exhausting, your arms burning long before the tinder does. But you notice that certain woods soft enough to wear down quickly, dry enough to heat fast, work better than others. Soon you have a short list in your mind. The roots of certain shrubs, the heartwood of fallen branches, the thin stems of desert plants. Over time, you refine the technique. One stick becomes the drill, spun between your palms. The other is the hearthboard, notched to collect the powdery dust created by the friction. The dust itself, heated by the movement, begins to glow. You tip it into your waiting bundle of tinder, blow and there's fire. This method takes longer to learn than striking stones, but it doesn't depend on finding the right rock, and in places without good flint, it's a lifeline. The ability to make fire changes everything about your movements. You no longer need to plan travel around keeping embers alive. You can risk letting a fire die during the day, knowing you can bring it back at night. You can stop in new places, high ridges, open plains, forest clearings, without worrying about natural sources nearby. Fire becomes as portable as your tools. It also changes your relationship with weather. Before, a sudden downpour could kill your fire and force you to wait for days until lightning struck somewhere nearby. Now, as long as you have dry tinder stored away, you can start again as soon as the rain passes. You begin to keep bundles of tinder in hide pouches, tucked under layers of fur to stay dry. Some you even prepare ahead of time, mixing shredded bark with powdered charcoal so it catches faster, or drying grass over a warm hearth to make it ready for travel. This mastery brings a new kind of confidence. You can venture further into cold regions, knowing you can make a fire, even when no embers survive the journey. You can stay in damp forests, lighting small, hot fires from carefully split dry wood. You can set controlled burns when you need them, without relying on the rare gift of lightning. It also begins to shape your social life. Those who can make fire reliably are valued, sought after. If your group loses its firemaker in an accident, the skill must be retaught quickly, or the group's survival is at risk. You begin to notice that some people guard the knowledge, while others share it freely. In some places it becomes a ritual taught at a certain age, demonstrated at important gatherings, even performed as a show of strength or skill before a hunt. Firemaking even influences trade. You might carry extra flint nodules or special tinder to exchange with other groups. In return, you might receive hides, food, or materials for tools. The fire itself is not traded too dangerous, too sacred, but the means to create it becomes a kind of currency. With this control comes experimentation. You test different rocks, different woods, different tinders. You find that heating certain stones before striking them changes the way they spark, or that soaking certain barks in animal fat makes them catch more easily. Some experiments fail spectacularly. Tinder that smokes too much and smothers the spark, or resin that flares so fast it burns your hand, but the failures teach as much as the successes. Making fire also changes the way you see the landscape. You begin to map it not just in terms of food and water, but in terms of materials. Here is the cliff where good flint can be found. Here is the grove with the perfect hearthboard wood. Here is the fungus that catches a spark and smoulders for hours. You return to these places again and again, as much for fire as for food. The more you practice, the faster you get. What once took an hour can now be done in minutes. You start to feel the rhythm in your body, the sharp, steady strikes of stone, the rolling motion of the drill between your palms, the moment when the tinder bundle warms in your hands before the first lick of flame appears. You know the smell of success before you see it, that faint, sweet scent of hot plant fiber just before it bursts into fire. And with every new flame you make, the dependence on nature's accidents fades. You are no longer waiting for lighting or volcanoes to gift you fire. You are taking it for yourself. It feels different, this kind of fire, not borrowed, not stolen, but born from your own hands. Around the hearth at night, the mood changes. You don't have to talk about it for everyone to know. This is power, not just in the practical sense, but in the way it makes you feel when you strike the stones or spin the drill and see that first wisp of smoke. It's a moment that feels like crossing a boundary between what you were and what you've become. You've turned a rare, unpredictable force into something you can summon whenever you choose. The wild no longer decides when you have fire. You do. And that choice, more than anything else, is what sets you apart from every other creature sharing this world. Once you can make fire at will, you stop thinking of it only as something that stays in the hearth. Now you can bring it into the wider world, not just as torches for light or warmth, but as a force to shape the land itself. You've already seen how wildfires clear grass and bring animals to graze on fresh shoots weeks later. Now you begin doing it on purpose. It starts small. You might set fire to a dry patch near camp to flush out hidden animals, hares, ground birds, even insects that can be gathered and eaten. The flames sweep quickly through, leaving nothing but a thin layer of ash and a few struggling wisps of smoke. You gather the stunned or fleeing creatures, cook them immediately, and realize this is faster than chasing them through the grass. Then you start to think bigger. If a small burn drives out a few animals, what would a larger one do? You choose a valley floor where the wind runs in a predictable direction. On a still morning, you set fire to one end and watch it crawl forward, a slow tide of orange and black. The animals trapped ahead of it scatter into the open, where hunters wait. The hunt is easier, the success rate higher, and the smell of cooked meat sometimes greets you before you even reach the kill. Over time, this becomes a planned activity. You scout an area days in advance, noting where the dry grass lies thickest, where the wind is most likely to carry the flames in the right direction, where you can stand safely away from the heat. You begin to make fire breaks, lines scraped into the earth where no grass grows to control the spread. You learn that burning against the wind creates a slower fire, easier to manage. Burning with it creates a rush that can get out of hand if you're careless. The land responds in ways you notice quickly. A few days after a burn, tender green shoots push up through the ash. Herd animals smell them from far away and come to graze. You wait, hunting when the herds are fattened, but before the grass grows too high to see them. This cycle, burn, wait, hunt, becomes part of your seasonal rhythm. Fire also changes the kinds of plants you find. Certain tubers sprout more vigorously after a burn. Some fruiting plants produce more in the seasons that follow. You might not understand the full reason, but you remember which patches to burn for better food later. You start leaving some areas untouched to provide cover for game, while others are kept open for easier hunting. This use of fire makes you look at the landscape differently. You begin to divide it into zones, those to be burned this year, those to be left for next year, those too risky to touch. You pay more attention to wind patterns, to the moisture in the grass, to how the slope of a hill changes the fire's speed. The land is no longer just something you move through, it's something you manage. Controlled burns also make travel easier. Dense thickets that once slowed you down can be cleared with a line of flame, leaving open ground for walking or hunting. Insects that plagued certain areas vanish for a while after a burn. Even the mood of the land changes. The dark ash under your feet feels cleaner, somehow, than the tangled undergrowth it replaced. But fire in the open isn't without danger. A sudden shift in wind can send flames toward your camp, or trap hunters in a loop of heat and smoke. There are burns that go wrong, embers jumping your fire breaks, dry trees catching in places you didn't expect, smoke so thick it blinds you. Sometimes you lose more than you gain. A grove of fruit trees turned to black skeletons, a hunting path made impassable for weeks. These mistakes leave scars on the land and on your memory. The risks force you to adapt. You burn smaller sections, light them from more than one point to control their spread, and always keep escape routes in mind. You learn to read the color of the smoke, white for damp fuel, dark for dry, almost invisible when the fire is burning hottest. You learn the sound of a fast fire, the deep rushing roar that means you should move quickly. The fire becomes a weapon too. Not against animals this time, but against rivals. You've seen how smoke can be seen from far away, and how a burn can force game to move from one area to another. Lighting a fire upwind of a rival's hunting ground can send prey fleeing toward your own. In rare cases, fire is used to push other groups from a desirable site altogether. It's dangerous and not done lightly, but the power is there, and power rarely stays unused for long. Beyond hunting and conflict, you find new uses in plant gathering. Some seeds are easier to collect after a burn, when the husks have dried and split. Certain edible greens sprout first in the blackened soil, concentrated in ways that make gathering faster. Even the ash itself has uses, rubbed on skin to keep insects away, mixed with animal fat for a crude salve, scattered in shallow pools to stun small fish for easy capture. The practice of burning begins to shape your group's movements across the year. You return to the same places season after season, burning them at the right time to ensure food and open ground when you need them. You start to see the signs of past burns, charred stumps, blackened stones, and remember who set them and why. The land becomes a living record of your interaction with it, marked in cycles of flame and regrowth. Fire even becomes part of your hunting tools in more direct ways. You carry torches into the night to drive animals toward traps, or to start small fires that funnel them into narrow passes. You light damp wood to create smoke screens, hiding your approach from skittish prey. You use heat to harden stakes for pit traps, making them more lethal. This control of fire on the landscape is a leap as significant as learning to cook. It changes the balance of power between you and the wild. Where once you had to adapt whatever the land gave you, now you can make the land adapt to you. You can decide where game will feed, where plants will grow, where paths will open. It also deepens your sense of territory. A burned area isn't just an open space. It's your open space made by your hands, with your fire. Other groups may pass through, but they know someone shaped this land recently. They see the signs and recognize them as deliberate, not accidental. The fire becomes your signature, as much a mark of presence as footprints or abandoned hearths. In the evenings after a burn, you sit around the hearth, the smell of smoke still clinging to your hair and skin. You talk about how the fire moved, how the animals ran, what you'll do differently next time. The stories of great burns, those that brought in huge herds or revealed rich patches of food, are told again and again, becoming part of the group's shared history. With this kind of control, the boundary between the natural and the made begins to blur. The land around you is no longer untouched. It carries the shape of your choices, the marks of your seasons, and always, at the center of it all, is fire, the tool, the weapon, the maker of landscapes. The night is quiet, but you're never alone out here. In the days before fire, that thought was pure danger. Now, it's a fact you've learned to bend in your favor, because predators, big cats, hyenas, wolves, still roam the edges of your world. They're faster, stronger, sharper than you, but they don't like the fire, and that dislike has become one of your greatest defenses. You first notice it without really noticing, the way eyes at the edge of the dark seem to stop just beyond the glow. The slow, deliberate pacing of a leopard in tall grass, never crossing that invisible line. The low shapes of hyenas holding back, whining softly, their outlines flickering in the light. Even snakes, creatures without fear of most things, don't often cross a ring of flames. It doesn't mean you're safe. You still hear the night come alive beyond the fire's reach. The deep cough of a lion, the chattering calls of jackals, the sudden scream of prey caught in the dark. Sometimes the predator will test the distance, creeping forward until the glow touches its fur, but almost always it stops, tail twitching, ears flat, before slinking back into the black. That hesitation is everything. Before, your group slept in shifts, the watchers tense, hearts pounding at every rustle. Now, you can all rest a little more deeply. Not completely, one ear is always turned to the night, but enough that you wake with less of the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from fear's constant pull. You start to arrange your camp with this in mind. Sleeping spots are pulled closer to the fire, and food scraps are burned or thrown far away, so they don't draw scavengers into the circle of light. Sometimes you build more than one fire, forming a rough perimeter. The outer ones are smaller, more smoke than flame, meant to send a message. This space is ours. There's a learning curve. A small fire can look strong but give off little heat, letting a predator approach without feeling its full force. A big one can throw sparks into the grass, threatening to burn the camp itself. You find a balance, enough light to be seen from a distance, enough heat to make the ground between you and the dark unwelcoming to cold-blooded or wary creatures. On hunts, you discover fire's power not just in keeping predators out, but in driving them back. If you find yourself near a carcass with lions moving in, a few flaming branches waved in their direction are often enough to make them pause, to buy time to take meat and retreat. With hyenas, a torch can scatter the boldest individuals, though they return quickly once the flames fade. Some predators, like the African hunting dog, seem more curious than afraid, circling just outside the light, with ears pricked forward. With them, the fire is a standoff, neither side pushing too far. But you learn to read body language, to see when curiosity is turning to hunger. A sudden tail lash, a shift in the ears, a tightening of the muscles, and you're shouting, waving torches, sending them back into the dark. The smoke is its own defense. Insects that would otherwise swarm your sleeping bodies drift away from it. Mosquitoes, midges, even some flies don't linger long near the thick, curling haze. You start to value certain woods for the kind of smoke they make. Pungent, heavy, lingering in the air, long after the flames have died down. You burn damp leaves intentionally at night to make a curtain of smoke between you and the open dark. When you move into colder or more open lands, the predators change. Wolves in packs, great bears that can stand taller than any person. The bears are unpredictable. Some will keep their distance. Others will walk straight through the glow as if it means nothing. You learn quickly that fire is not an absolute shield. It is a tool, one you must still use with strategy and awareness. Sometimes you take fire with you to meet danger before it reaches you. A ring of torches carried by several people can create a moving barrier, pushing predators away from a path you need to take. It's tiring to hold the line. Arms ache, smoke stings the eyes, but it's better than walking blind into an ambush. There are moments when fire not only protects you, but changes predator behavior entirely. In grasslands, lions often hunt at night, using the cover of darkness to get close. With fire at your camp, they shift their approach, moving farther downwind, stalking at times when you're away from the flames. You notice this and adjust your habits, staying close to the hearth during certain hours, sending scouts to check for tracks in the early morning light. The fire's protection gives you confidence in places you would never have slept before. Rocky outcrops with little cover, open flats where the wind sweeps unbroken. These are no longer instant dangers if you can set a fire quickly and keep it alive. You choose sites based on where you can see far in every direction, trusting the flames to cover the lack of natural shelter. That confidence changes your range. You move through predator territory without the same constant edge of fear. You can follow herds longer, stay out later, explore waterholes at dusk, without needing to flee immediately after drinking. This extra time in high-value areas means more food, better tools, stronger hides. Fire also gives you the option to fight back in ways that were never possible before. A predator that would once have been untouchable can now be challenged, sometimes even killed, if you have enough people with enough flames. You don't seek these fights, but when they come, the fire turns the odds. A wounded predator, forced back by the heat, will often retreat entirely rather than risk the strange biting light. This defense extends to your shelters. In cold months, you might sleep in caves where predators also take refuge. By lighting a fire at the entrance and keeping it stoked, you create a barrier no scent mark can match. The smoke seeps into every crack, masking your smell, making the space feel claimed. Still, you never forget that fire can draw as well as repel. The smell of cooking meat carries far, and hungry animals might push closer than they normally would. The light itself can be a beacon for scavengers. You learn to watch for both, the approach of fear and the approach of hunger, and to meet each with the right amount of flame. Children grow up learning these patterns, how to wave a torch without dropping embers on themselves, how to add damp grass to make smoke, how to hold a stick so the flame stays at arm's length. They practice at the edge of camp, their shouts echoing into the night, until the motions become second nature. In the long run, the fire's role in protection changes how you see predators. They're no longer unstoppable forces in the dark. They're part of a system you can manage. You know when to bluff, when to stand your ground, when to retreat. The fire has given you that choice. And with choice comes control. And yet, there's always the awareness that the dark beyond the flames is still full of eyes, that a misjudged distance, a fire left too low, or a night of strong wind could erase your advantage in minutes. Fire doesn't erase the danger, it just gives you the tools to survive it. When you first begin to keep a hearth for more than a few nights, you don't think of it as a permanent thing. It's just a fire you've managed not to lose yet. But in some places, especially in caves or sheltered valleys, the fire lasts not just days or weeks, it lasts seasons. It becomes a fixture, as much a part of the site as the stones you sit on, or the marks on the walls. Neanderthals are masters of this kind of long-term firekeeping. You can tell just by walking into one of their shelters. In the center, there's a hearth blackened with years of use, the ash packed down into layers by countless feet. Stones form a ring that's been adjusted and rebuilt so many times that each rock fits perfectly against the next. The smoke has stained the ceiling, leaving a dark halo above the fire pit, and the smell of it is permanent. Wood, meat, and something faintly metallic from tools and bones heated nearby. In these long-term sites, the hearth becomes the core of a home. Sleeping spots radiate outward from it, closer in winter, farther in summer. Tool making happens in the best lit spots, near the flames. Piles of fuel are stacked neatly against the walls or under overhangs, dry and ready. Sometimes there's more than one fire, a main hearth for warmth and cooking, and smaller ones for tasks like drying hides or smoking meat. Keeping a fire alive for months at a time takes skill and routine. Each morning, someone rakes through the ashes to find the embers, banks them with dry fuel, and builds the flames back up. At night, the last person awake piles on larger logs, tucks the glowing core under a layer of ash, and shields it from wind. In winter, the hearth never goes cold. Even when you travel for a few days, you leave someone behind to guard it, or you bury embers deep in a container of ash so they'll smolder until you return. The fire itself changes over time in these settled places. Early in the season, the wood burns clean and bright, filling the shelter with golden light. Later, when the best fuel is gone, the smoke thickens, and you burn whatever you can find: green branches, roots, even animal dung. The smell changes with each shift in material, and everyone in the camp learns to recognize what's on the fire by scent alone. Long-term fires make life more predictable. You can store tools and food, knowing you'll have heat to work and cook with whenever you need it. You can dry wood in advance, harden spear points before a hunt, and keep hides supple instead of letting them stiffen in the cold. You can plan tasks that take days or weeks, because the fire will be there to finish them. These sites also gather history. As the seasons pass, the ashes build up, sometimes so deep you have to shovel them out to reach bare earth again. Charred bones accumulate at the edges, the remains of meals stretching back years, broken tools, worn-out baskets, bits of worked wood, all end up in or near the hearth. To an outside eye, it might look messy, but for those who live here, each layer is a record. This was the winter of scarce fuel, that was the summer of plentiful fish. Here's where the great hunt's feast left its mark. The fire's presence shapes how you relate to the land around you. You know which areas provide the best fuel, how far you can go to gather it before the return trip becomes exhausting. You keep mental maps of nearby groves, deadfalls and driftwood piles, visiting them regularly to keep your stores full. In some places, trails form from the constant travel back and forth, the ground worn smooth by generations of footsteps hauling wood. Visitors notice your fire before they notice you. From a distance, they see the glow reflected on the cave walls, or the steady column of smoke in the still air. That light is both a welcome and a warning. It says there is warmth and food here, but it also says this place is claimed. Long-term fires also change the way you use light. In temporary camps, you tend the flames mostly at night, letting them burn low or out during the day. Here, the fire might burn low all day long, providing steady heat and enough light for indoor work. You can shape and repair tools in comfort, even when storms rage outside. You can sort plant fibers or stitch hides by the shifting glow without rushing to finish before darkness falls. Over time, the hearth takes on meaning beyond its function. It becomes the place where stories are told, where disputes are settled, where decisions are made. It's the gathering point for the start and end of each day. Even when the fire is low, people sit near it out of habit, as if the stones themselves hold some invisible pull. There are dangers to keeping a long-term fire. A sudden flare can send sparks into dry bedding or grass, and the enclosed space of a cave can trap smoke if the wind changes unexpectedly. Fuel shortages can force you to ration heat, keeping the fire just strong enough to survive, but not enough to make the space truly warm. And there's the constant need for maintenance. Neglect it for even a day or two, and months of continuous burning can end in cold ash. Still, the benefits outweigh the risks. A long-term fire is stability in a world that changes constantly. It means you can return from a cold hunt to instant warmth, from a long day's gathering to a place where meat can be cooked without waiting. It means you can carry out projects that require steady heat, like drying strips of meat for storage or slowly shrinking a wooden handle to fit a stone blade perfectly. Some of these fires last so long that children grow up never knowing a night without its glow. They fall asleep to the same rhythms, the crackle of wood, the low voices of adults, the soft hiss as a log shifts in the coals that their parents and grandparents heard before them. The hearth is a living thread, tying one generation to the next, a constant in a life of movement and change. And when the time finally comes to leave a long-term camp, the fire is the last thing to go. You scatter the ashes, take the best stones if they can be carried, and wrap the strongest embers in bundles of bark and hide. Some you bury deep, in case you or someone like you comes back. Even as you walk away, the faint trail of smoke lingers behind you, marking the end of one place and the beginning of the next. Once you can make fire at will and keep it alive for months, it becomes more than a possession. It becomes something you can give. And when you can give something as powerful as fire, you begin to realize it can be traded, shared, and taught. The knowledge of fire making, along with the fire itself, starts to travel farther than you ever could alone. At first, this happens by accident. You meet another group at a river crossing, and they notice the blackened bundle of bark strapped to your side. They ask, without words but with clear gestures, if it's alive inside. You show them the ember, glowing faintly in its bed of ash, and their eyes widen. You hand it over, and they guard it like a newborn hurrying away to build it into a flame of their own. Later, these meetings become more intentional. Sometimes you arrive at a camp to find strangers waiting, their own fires long gone cold. They offer food or tools in exchange for a coal or two. You might trade them flint, or a pouch of the dried moss that catches sparks easily, or a shaped hearthboard that makes drilling faster. These are no longer just survival items, they're commodities. The trade goes both ways. From others, you might receive types of wood you've never burned before, ones that produce little smoke or smell sweet as they burn. You might get new tinder materials that work in damp weather, or stones that spark hotter than your own. Sometimes you trade not the fire or materials, but the knowledge itself, showing someone the right way to hold the stones or how to spin the drill without tiring too quickly. Fire sharing isn't always peaceful. In times of scarcity, some groups refuse to give or trade it, guarding it like the last waterhole in a drought. There are raids, quick strikes to snatch embers from another's hearth. These encounters are dangerous because both sides know what's at stake. Without fire, a group may go hungry, cold, or be forced to travel far in search of a natural source. Over time, alliances form around the sharing of fire. Two groups might agree to help each other keep it alive through bad weather, or to meet at certain seasons to trade fuel and materials. In some places, fire sharing becomes a kind ritual, an ember passed from one hearth to another, while both groups stand close, the glow lighting their faces. It's more than a transaction, it's a sign of trust, a bond that can last long after the flames themselves have died. Teaching fire making is different. Not everyone wants to give away the skill. Some fear that once others can make it themselves, they won't need you. But those who do teach find it changes relationships. You're not just giving a thing, you're giving a power. And when someone makes their first flame under your guidance, there's a spark of pride, both theirs and yours, that's hard to match. The roots of these exchanges begin to shape the movement of people. You start to recognize the places where you've shared fire before, a cliff overhang where you taught a youth from another band to strike flint, a riverside clearing where you left embers buried in ash for anyone who came after. You see signs that others have been here, hearth circles in familiar patterns, blackened stones placed just so. Fire itself becomes a message. A distant column of smoke might mean a group is nearby and willing to trade. A large blaze on a ridge could be a signal, though it could also be a warning. You learn to read these signs and to send your own, careful to place them where they'll be seen by friends, but not enemies. Sometimes, the sharing happens over great distances. You might pass fire to one group, who pass it to another, and so on until the ember you started ends up hundreds of miles away. It's a chain you can't see, but you can imagine it. Your fire travelling across landscapes you've never set foot on, lighting hearths in caves you'll never sleep in. The materials for making fire also become trade goods in their own right. Certain flints are valued far beyond their place of origin. People will carry them for days to give to a friend or trade for food. Special hearthboards made from slow-burning woods are passed along like prized tools. Even ash from certain plants, used to prepare tinder, can be part of an exchange. As the exchanges grow, so does the variety of fire in your life. You burn woods that crackle in bright sparks, others that give a steady, silent glow. You try resins that scent the air, grasses that flare bright for quick cooking, even dried seaweed that hisses and snaps as it burns. Each new material brings a slightly different light, a slightly different heat, and you begin to think of fire not as one thing, but as many, each with its own character. You start to see that fire sharing isn't just about survival, it's about connection. The groups you trade with are no longer just faces you pass on the trail. They are part of a network that extends beyond your own camp. The ember you give them might keep them alive in a storm, or warm a newborn through its first night, or cook a meal that seals an alliance. And there's another layer. Stories begin to attach themselves to the fire. You might hear that the ember you passed on months ago was used in a great feast, or that it burned in a hearth where two groups met in peace for the first time. These tales travel back to you like smoke on the wind, making your fire feel larger than the ring of stones it was born in. Fire even becomes a way to repair damaged bonds. If two groups have fought, one might offer fire as a gesture of reconciliation, an unspoken way of saying, "We want you to live." It's a dangerous gift because it can be refused, but when accepted, it has the weight of a truce. Over time, some groups become known for their fire. They have the best materials, the most reliable makers, the longest burning embers. When you meet them, you know you're meeting people who understand fire as deeply as you do. Maybe the exchange between you is not just practical, it's almost ceremonial, a meeting of equals who speak the same unspoken language. This network of fire sharing changes how you think about distance and isolation. Even when your own camp feels alone, you know there are others out there, with flames born from the same hands, the same spark. You are part of something bigger, a web of warmth and light stretching across the land. In the end, the fire you make and keep is never entirely yours. Every ember is a potential gift, every flame a potential bridge, and each time you pass it on, you're not just giving heat and light, you're sending a piece of your world into someone else's night. By the time you reach 50,000 BCE, fire is no longer just a discovery, a trick, or even a skill. It's woven into the fabric of human life. You can't imagine a world without it, because your entire way of living assumes it will be there. It's in the way you hunt, cook, craft, travel, defend yourself, and tell stories. It's in the shape of your camps, the rhythm of your days, and the memories you pass down. Fire has become human. It's everywhere you go. From the open grasslands of Africa to the dense forests of Europe, from the river valleys of the Near East to the windy coasts of Asia, every inhabited place shows the signs: blackened hearths, scorched stones, charcoal mixed with the soil. Some of these marks are fresh, still warm from last night's flames. Others are older, months, years, even decades cold, but still telling the same truth. People were here, and they made this place theirs, with fire. The technology of fire is refined now. You know the best flint to carry, the driest hearthboard, the easiest tinder to catch a spark. You know how to start a flame in the rain, how to keep it alive in wind, how to make it burn low and slow, or high and hot. You can make torches that last for hours, smoky fires that drive insects away, and clear, bright flames for working at night. You can bank coals to last until morning, or smother a fire so thoroughly that no predator or rival human will find your camp. Hearths are no longer just circles of stone. Some are dug into the ground to block the wind. Others are built against rock walls to reflect the heat. In cold regions, you've learned to create channels for smoke to escape without losing all the warmth. In some camps, there are multiple fires, each with a purpose. One for cooking, one for drying hides, one for hardening tools, one kept small but always burning to make starting new fires easy. The uses have multiplied beyond what your earliest ancestors could have imagined. Food is still roasted and boiled, but now it's also smoked, dried, and stored for seasons ahead. Tools are hardened, stones heat-treated for sharper blades. Hides are cured with smoke. Glue from animal sinew or resin is prepared over controlled heat. Water is warmed for drinking, cleaning, or softening plant fibers. In every case, the work is faster, easier, and more reliable because you can shape the fire to match the task. The social life around the fire is richer too. Evenings are not just a time for warmth and food, they're for planning hunts, teaching skills, and sharing knowledge. The firelight allows hands to demonstrate the right grip for a spear thrower, the correct angle to strike a flake from stone, the careful way to set a snare. Children watch and imitate, their small hands outlined in the flicker. Old stories are told not just about the hunt, but about the fire itself, the time lightning struck near camp, the journey when the embers were carried for weeks, the first time someone here learned to make flame from stone and air. Fire has become part of ritual and meaning. A new hearth might be lit from the embers of an old one to carry the past into a new home. Certain woods might be burned for special occasions, the smell rising into the night like an offering. Fire may mark a birth, a coming of age, or a death, its light serving as witness to moments the group wants to remember. It is also a signal, a language of its own. A column of smoke in the distance can say, "We are here. Come join us," or keep away, depending on how and where it's sent. At night, a flame on a ridge can be a guide for friends or a warning for strangers. You know how to read these signs, and you know that others can read yours. The mastery of fire has shaped your relationship with the land. You no longer simply take what it offers, you shape it. Controlled burns create open grazing for game, encourage the growth of certain plants, and clear paths for travel. You time these burns for when the wind and moisture will keep them under control, and you return to harvest the results weeks or months later. The land becomes a living map of your choices, marked by patches of green where fire once ran. This control also means you can live in places once thought impossible. The icy edges of glacial plains, the deep interior of forests, the wind-battered coasts, all are open to you because you can bring heat, light, and cooked food with you. Fire lets you adapt to each place, building shelters that work with its warmth, storing fuel in ways that keep it dry, and making every campsite a livable home. Fire has become part of your defense, not just from predators, but from other people. Rival groups know that attacking a camp with strong, bright fires means facing a united group with weapons in hand. Shadows moving quick in the glow. Torches can drive an enemy back. Smoke can mask an escape, and the fire itself can be spread to create a barrier. But perhaps the greatest change is in how fire has altered your sense of time. Nights are no longer endless darkness. You divide them into the life of the fire. The first blaze after sunset is bright and busy. The middle of the night is steady coals, and the hours before dawn are a slow build toward warmth and light again. Seasons, too, are marked by fire. The long, bright blazes of winter, the smaller, faster cooking fires of summer, the smoky, fuel-saving hearths of wet seasons. The fire has also left its mark on your senses. You can tell the heat of a flame without touching it, smell the difference between green wood and dry, hear the change in pitch when a log is about to collapse into coals. You've learnt to read smoke the way you read clouds, knowing when it signals trouble, food or shelter. Your hands remember the weight of fuel, the feel of stones warming under your palms, the rhythm of feeding the flames without letting them flare too high. Over generations, this mastery becomes so normal that it's easy to forget there was ever a time without it. But deep down, in the oldest part of your memory, there's still the awareness that fire is alive. You feed it, protect it, carry it, and in return it shapes your life. That relationship is one of care and vigilance, because no matter how skilled you are, one careless moment can still turn fire from friend to destroyer. As the Ice Age continues, fire remains your constant companion. The landscape changes, herds move, rivers shift course, but the fire is the same, orange and gold, crackling and breathing in the dark. You've learnt to keep it close, but not too close, to let it work for you, but never forget it can take as quickly as it gives. In quiet moments at the hearth, you think of how far you've come from the first frightened step toward a wildfire's dying edge. That ancient curiosity, mixed with fear, has led to a mastery that lets you shape not just your own life, but the land, the animals, and even the people around you. And when the fire burns low at the end of the night, you feel the same pull your ancestors did, the urge to lean closer, to watch the embers breathe, to listen to the soft hiss as air meets heat. You know that when the sun rises, you'll feed it again, carry it forward, pass it on, because the fire isn't just part of your world now. It is the heart of it. Sweet dreams.